I reject you, Elara. Fully finally 6 years a mate, 63 witnesses. One brand burned into her neck while her husband watched, relieved. 2 days later she had 3 silver coins and no to run in a kingdom ruled by wolves. A chained beast stood on the auction block. Silver grey, muzzled hours from execution. No one knew he was the missing Alpha King. No one knew the coup that buried him had also buried her. She spent her last 3 coins to save him. He saw the brand on her neck. She saw the scars on his. Neither of them looked away. Bounty notices, burning roads, a traitor husband hunting them through the dark, a throne stolen, a mate bond waking, gold light rising beneath her skin. They underestimated the broken woman. You bought a king for 3 coins. Now I burn the kingdom that branded you. She had 3 silver coins left in the world. No pack, no home, no wolf. The brand on her neck was still raw, still pulsing in time with her heartbeat, and the town that had watched her fall hadn't looked away fast enough to pretend they hadn't enjoyed it. 2 days. 2 days since her life had ended in a circle of 63 witnesses, and the silver in her palm was the only proof she still existed at all. The alley behind the grain merchant's stall smelled like old straw and something worse. Elara Thorne sat with her back pressed flat against cold stone, knees drawn up to her chest, and counted the coins for the 4th time that morning. 3. Always 3. Not because counting would multiply them. Because counting was the last thing in her life that still answered to her hand. The market was waking around her. Vendors calling, cartwheels grinding. Somewhere a child laughed, bright and careless, and the sound landed in her chest like an accusation. Somewhere people were having ordinary mornings. Somewhere people still had homes to return to. Somewhere a woman was probably arguing with her husband about whether the milk had turned, and Elara would have given anything to be her. She closed her fist around the silver, held it until the edges bit her palm. She needed the small, clean pane of metal against skin, because the larger pane had no surface she could press to make it stop her. 6 years. She had been Theron Vance's mate for 6 years, bound at 20. Bound when she still believed binding meant something. She had healed his men, fed his pack, slept beside him through 3 brutal winters, and learned the rhythm of his breath so completely that even now she could hear it phantom close, like a sound that had moved into her bones and forgotten to leave. And then 2 days ago he had stood in the gathering circle of Duskmare pack and said the words, "I reject you, Elara, fully and finally. You are no wolf of mine." He hadn't even looked sorry. That was the part she kept returning to, the part that wouldn't let her sleep. He had looked relieved, as if he had been carrying her the way a man carries a stone in his boot, and the rejection was simply the moment he finally sat down to shake it out. The elder had pressed the heated iron disc against her neck, the suppressor brand, burned in ceremony fire, sealed in the old language, designed to lock her wolf away until another mate claimed her or the Alpha Council granted formal dissolution. She had stood perfectly still while they did it. 63 pairs of eyes watching. She would not give them the gift of her flinch. She had flinched a mile down the road, alone. When her legs finally stopped working and the truth landed in her chest with the full weight of itself. She had crawled to the side of the road and pressed her forehead to the dirt and made a sound she didn't recognize as her own. Now she sat in an alley, counting coins. Trying to decide if she was angry enough yet to stand up. She was deciding she probably wasn't when the noise of the market changed, not louder, uglier. That specific shift in a crowd sound when entertainment tips into cruelty, when laughter develops an edge. She had grown up in a pack. She knew that sound the way other women knew lullabies. It was the sound her own pack had made 2 days ago. Watching her go, she stayed where she was for 10 full seconds, counting them, because if she got up too fast it would be because she wanted to. And she wasn't going to want anything yet. Then she got up. The auction block in the center of Millhaven Market was used for livestock on Tuesdays and debts on Fridays. Today was Friday. She pushed through the gathered crowd expecting a debtor's chair, a man in irons, some commonplace and forgettable cruelty she could walk past without it sticking to her. What she found on the platform stopped her moving entirely. A wolf, not shifted. Still in animal form, which meant someone had done something to prevent the shift back, which was not a small thing to manage and not a kind thing to want. It was enormous even by wolf standards. Silver-grey coat matted with old blood and something darker that she didn't let herself name yet. An iron muzzle bolted around its jaw, the kind used on feral animals. The kind that left marks the rest of a life couldn't outwalk, Its legs were hobbled with chains so short the beast could barely stand. And it was standing anyway. That was the part she noticed first. Because apparently that was the kind of wolf it was. The crowd around the platform was having a fine time. A boy near the front had collected a handful of pebbles and was throwing them one at a time, aiming for the wolf's hind quarters with the focused cruelty children sometimes have when no one teaches them otherwise. A woman to Elara's left was explaining to her friend that the beast had been caught raiding a sheep pen 3 towns east, that it had killed 2 of the shepherd's dogs, that wolves like this one were why the western roads weren't safe anymore. The auctioneer was a thin man with a voice built for carrying. 5 silver to start. 5 silver for a wolf this size. Think of the use. Strong back once it shifts, assuming anyone can break it. Elara looked at the wolf. It was not looking at the crowd. Not at the pebble-throwing boy or the auctioneer or anything in front of it. Its eyes, and she could see them now, gold layered strangely over grey in a way she had never seen on any wolf she had treated, were moving in slow methodical arcs across the market square, scanning, not panicked, not despairing, calculating. The wolf was cataloguing exits, counting distances, assessing the gap between the platform and the alley mouth on the north side. Doing, in short, exactly what she had been doing 20 minutes ago in an alley with 3 coins in her palm, except with chains on its legs and an iron bolt through its jaw, and a crowd of strangers throwing pebbles at it for fun. The suppressor brand on her neck pulsed once. Strangely. Like a second heartbeat, she hadn't agreed to host 3 silver, the auctioneer said. 3. Practically a gift. She made herself look away. Because she had nothing, because she had no food and no shelter that was actually hers, and nowhere to put a wolf, and no reason on earth to want one. Because this was the stupidest thought she had entertained in a lifetime of occasionally stupid thoughts. She started walking away. She got 4 steps. She stopped, stood there with her back to the platform and her 3 coins burning a hole in her palm and her jaw locked tight enough to ache. I know, she told herself, quietly enough that no one nearby could hear. I know. I'm doing it anyway. She turned around. What happens if no one bids, she called, loudly enough to carry. The auctioneer looked at her with the expression of a man who had not expected that question from a woman who looked like she'd slept in an alley. Sundown, he said. The beast is destroyed. The crowd made a sound that was almost approval, and something in Elara's chest went very quiet. Not calm, the other kind of quiet. The kind that arrives before a decision has finished forming and lets you know it's coming anyway. She looked at the wolf again, and the wolf, for the first time since she'd walked into the square, was looking back at her. Those strange layered eyes fixed on her face with an attention that was not animal and was not quite human and was entirely unsettling, as if it had been waiting, as if of the 80-some people gathered in the square, it had finally found the one whose face it had been looking for. She opened her fist and looked at 3 silver. 2 silver, she said, pushing forward through the crowd before the sensible part of her brain could catch up to her body. She slapped the coins onto the auctioneer's table. That's what you said. 2 silver, the auctioneer stared at her. The crowd stared at her. She was aware she was not an impressive sight. Travel-worn coat, shadows under her eyes deep enough to hold rain, the distinctive suppressor brand visible above her collar like a confession she hadn't agreed to make. The auctioneer's eyes flicked to it. She watched him do the math, rejected Omega. No pack, no money worth speaking of. The wolf was about to be destroyed anyway, and 2 silver was 2 silver more than nothing. Miss, he started, with the particular tone of a man trying to talk a customer out of a decision while still wanting to close the sale. This is a feral wolf, unclaimed. No pack mark, no registration. Which is why it's 2 silver. She held his gaze. I'm a healer. Or I was. Something tight moved through her chest at the word was. I know what I'm looking at, I'll take it. A pause. The auctioneer looked at the coins, looked at the wolf, looked at her. He pocketed the coins. The crowd, sensing the entertainment had taken an unexpected turn, didn't disperse so much as adjust. Leaning in for the next part of the show, Elara turned to face what she had just bought. The wolf was watching her, still calculating. Still with that unnerving intelligence in its strange gold-gray eyes. She had expected something, relief maybe, or the simple animal recognition of a rescuer, some flicker of acknowledgement that made this feel less insane than it was. What she got was a stare so flat and assessing that the hair on the back of her arms stood up. She crossed to the platform and crouched down to look at the hobble chains and felt the wolf's attention tracking her hands. her movements, her breath, reading her. The way she had read patience for 6 years. "I'm going to undo these," she said quietly, because she had always talked to animals and there was no reason to stop now. "And then we're going to walk out of this square together and find somewhere to put you, and then you are going to let me look at whatever is wrong with you." The wolf stared at her. "Right," she said. "Yes, it is." She undid the hobbles, stood up, gestured toward the alley at the market's edge, the way out, the open space beyond the crowd. The wolf did not move. She gestured again. More pointedly, the wolf sat down. The crowd, which had been holding its breath in anticipation of a spectacle, began to laugh. Elara looked at the wolf sitting calmly in the middle of the market square with an iron muzzle on its jaw, and 100 strangers laughing at her, and she breathed in once through her nose. Slowly, the way she had taught herself to breathe before delivering bad news to a family. "I just spent everything I had on you," she said. The wolf blinked. Everything. It blinked again. She crouched back down, level with those layered eyes, spoke very quietly, so only the wolf could hear. "I don't know what you are, but I know what that look is. I wore it myself 2 days ago. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to get up, and you are going to walk with me. And I am going to keep you alive. And one day, when this is over for both of us, you can go wherever you want. But right now you walk." The silence stretched. Then slowly, with the unhurried weight of a decision made on terms no one in the square would ever understand, the wolf stood up. The shed Merith Fen had given her belonged to a woman who had taken one look at Elara 2 days ago and pressed a key into her hand without being asked. 2 weeks, Merith had said, voice flat and final. "Then my nephew wants it back for storage." Elara hadn't argued. 2 weeks was 2 weeks. Now she stood in the doorway of that shed with a wolf at her hip and tried to remember how she had imagined her life when she was 20. She couldn't. The girl who had bound herself to Theron Vance at 20 felt like someone Elara had read about once in a book she no longer owned. She pushed the door wider. The wolf walked past her without looking, which she chose to take as progress. Inside, the shed was barely large enough for a cot, a washstand, and whatever dignity she could arrange between them. She had a tinderbox, half a blanket from the market rag pile, a clay pot she had been using to boil water, and a small bundle of dried herbs she had kept in her coat pocket out of pure stubborn habit. Healer's habit. The kind that persists even when you have no one left to heal. She shut the door, turned, found the wolf standing in the center of the small space, looking at everything with that same methodical attention. Walls, ceiling, the single shuttered window, the door she had just closed, her face last. "Sit down," she said. "You're bleeding through your back left flank, and you've been favoring it since the square." The wolf looked at her flank comment with what on a human face would have been mild contempt. "I know you understood that. So sit." It sat, not with any great compliance. More the way a person sits when they have deciding was already what they were going to do, and the woman in front of them has simply confirmed the timing. She crouched behind it, pushed the matted coat aside carefully, and what she found made her hands go still. She had trained under the Duskmare pack healer for 4 years before she had taken over the role herself. She had treated shift wounds and silver burns, and the ugly territorial damage of dominance disputes. She knew what injury looked like. This was not injury, this was surgery. 4 sites along the wolf's left flank, evenly spaced, methodically placed, old scarring on 3 of them, white and smooth from procedures done weeks or months ago, and 1 fresh wound, maybe 3 days old, still seeping, not a tear, not a bite, made by a blade, by someone who knew exactly where to cut and how deep, and how often a body could survive being cut there. She sat back on her heels, looked at the pattern, and something cold moved through her with the certainty of a diagnosis she had hoped to be wrong about. Someone had been harvesting this wolf. Repeatedly. The concentrated essence that pulled in a dominant wolf system, the biological marker of alpha rank. On the black market, a single vial sold for more than a healer earned in a year. It was used in dominance rituals, in illegal binding ceremonies, in the kind of pack politics that happened in rooms where men didn't write things down. It was also, if done repeatedly, eventually fatal. "Who did this to you?" she said. Though she did not expect an answer, she got one, not in words. The wolf shifted, partial, painful. The kind of incomplete shift that happened when something was actively suppressing the full change. It was a horrible thing to watch, the body trying to become something and being stopped halfway through the becoming, and she held still and did not look away. Because looking away felt like abandonment, and she had been abandoned recently enough to know what it cost. What emerged for 30 seconds was something between, larger than the wolf form, shaped vaguely like a man. Features blurred at the edges like a sketch someone had not yet committed to finishing. One massive hand closed around her wrist, not hard, not threatening, just stopping her. She looked down at the hand on her wrist. She looked up. The eyes in the half form were extraordinary. Gold over silver, yes, but up close they had depth to them. Layers stacking inside layers, the way old fire looks when you stare into the heart of it. They were fixed on her neck, on the suppressor brand. She watched the expression in those eyes change. The flat calculation she had seen in the square softened into something she recognized because she had felt it herself in an alley counting 3 coins. The specific look of a person who has just encountered someone else, who understands what they are carrying without needing it explained. Then the hand on her wrist turned slowly, deliberately, and the wolf, the man, the in-between thing, showed her his inner wrist. She went very still. A suppressor mark was burned into the skin of his inner wrist, small, precise, unmistakably deliberate, not a rejection brand. She knew what those looked like. She was wearing one. This was different, older in design, a sealing mark, the kind used by pack authorities to lock down a wolf's shift entirely. She had seen this design exactly once, in a textbook, in the pack library at Duskmere years ago. The kind of book that was kept on a high shelf and dusted by no one. Someone with significant power had put that mark on him. Someone had stripped his ability to become himself and then sold him. "Who did this to you?" she asked again, and this time she was not sure she was asking about the surgical wounds. The half-form held for another moment, then collapsed back into wolf, the process no less difficult to watch in reverse. He was panting when it was done, exhausted by the effort of even that much. Elara sat on the floor of the shed beside him and opened her bundle of dried herbs and started working. Because that was what she did when she did not know what else to do. She talked while she worked, not because she expected him to respond, because the silence was too large and her voice made her hands steady. "I was a healer," she said, cleaning the fresh wound with boiled water and a strip torn from the rag pile blanket. "For 6 years, I was the Duskmere Pack's healer. I was good at it." She pressed the cloth gently against the wound, felt him tense and hold still. "My mate decided he wanted someone else. He could have just said so. It would have been awful, but I would have eventually been fine." A pause. Instead, he did it in the gathering circle. In front of everyone, the wolf was quiet. The wolf had been quiet the whole time. But there was a quality to his stillness now that was different. It was not the stillness of an animal recovering from pain. It was the stillness of a witness. "The worst part," she said, surprising herself with how easily the words came, "is that I didn't see it coming. I'm a healer. I read people for a living. I read him every day for 6 years, and I missed it completely." She tied off the bandaging. Makeshift, but it would hold. "That bothers me more than the rest of it, honestly." She sat back, looked at her work, looked at him. He was watching her with those layered eyes, and there was something in them now that had not been there in the market square. Not sympathy. She did not need sympathy and would have refused it. Something more like attention, the real kind, the kind that meant what you were saying was being received and held. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," she said. He held her gaze, steady. "I don't even know your name." He shifted his weight. Then, with the obvious effort of someone working around a constraint, he opened his jaw slightly against where the muzzle had been and shaped a sound. It came out rough, abraded, like a voice that had not been used in a long time. One syllable. "Careful, Calum." "Calum," she repeated. He dipped his head once. "Elara," she said. And then, "Because it seemed fair, but you already knew that, didn't you?" It was not a question. She had seen the way his eyes had moved to her face in the square. The way he had tracked her through the crowd before she had spoken. The way he had looked at her specifically out of 80 people and waited. He held her gaze and said nothing. She filed it away. There would be time for that conversation later. Assuming they had a later, she was settling that thought when the sound reached her. Low voices outside, boots on the path. More than one set, moving toward the shed with the particular lack of hurry that meant they knew where they were going and weren't worried about resistance. Calum was already on his feet. 3 knocks, slow. Deliberate. "We know you're in there," a man's voice. Pack trained. Authority seasoned, and under the surface of it, something Elara recognized in the way you recognize a song you used to know the words to. The wolf you purchased this morning belongs to the Duskmere pack. It was taken from our healer's custody without consent. Return it, and we'll forget you were involved." Elara stood very still in the center of the shed. Duskmere, her pack. Theron's pack. The pack that had put a brand on her neck 2 days ago while 63 people watched and said nothing. Their healer, the man who had replaced her, had been the one cutting into Calum. Their healer had been harvesting him, Brennan Hale. She recognized the voice now, head enforcer of Duskmere. She had healed a deep shoulder wound for him 2 years ago. He had thanked her properly, brought her dried fish from his hunt share for a month afterward. His wife had sent her a small bundle of dried apple slices that winter when their stores were thin. She wondered if Brennan remembered any of that. She looked at Calum, who was standing close behind her left shoulder, and the look on his half-visible face, still fighting toward human, still caught between, was not fear and was not desperation. It was the same flat calculation from the market square. He was waiting to see what she would do. Elara walked to the door. "Did not open it." "He's mine," she said, loud and clear. "Purchased legally in Millhaven Market in front of 30 witnesses at the auctioneer's declared price. If the Duskmere pack has a counterclaim, they can bring it to the market magistrate with documentation." She paused. "Come back with the law on your side, or don't come back at all. Silence on the other side of the door. Then you have until morning to reconsider." "Elara, it's Brennan. Open the door and we can sort this out. You don't know what you've got in there." For a half-second she almost did, almost reached for the latch, because her hand still remembered the shape of his shoulder under her fingers 2 years ago. Because her body had grown up trusting that voice and her body had not yet caught up to what her mind already knew. Then she didn't. Then she stepped back from the door and said nothing at all. Because Brennan Hale stood on her doorstep, representing the people who had harvested a king like meat, and the woman who had healed his shoulder 2 years ago no longer existed. Footsteps retreated. 5 sets, by her count. She had not realized she was counting until the count was finished. Elara stood facing the closed door and breathed. She was shaking. She could feel it in her hands, in her jaw, in the soft hollow under her ribs where fear lived. But she was still standing, and the door was still closed. And that was what mattered tonight. Behind her, she heard movement. She turned. Calum had crossed the small distance of the shed. He lowered himself to sit beside her, not behind her, not at her feet, beside her, level, present. And then, with a deliberateness that felt like a complete sentence, he rested his head against her shoulder. She stood there with the shake still in her hands and the brand still pulsing on her neck, and 3 coins lighter than she had been that morning. And she breathed out slowly. The first breath she had taken all day that felt like her own. "All right," she said quietly. "All right." What Elara did not know yet, and what Theron Vance had spent 6 years making sure she did not find out, was that the brand on her neck was not a standard rejection mark at all. He had buried something inside her on purpose. He had been afraid of it from the first year of their bond, and the rejection in the gathering circle had not been about another woman. It had been about her. About something in her he had never been man enough to stand beside, but she did not know that yet. Tonight she only knew she had spent 3 silver coins on a wolf who carried himself like a king, and that for the first time in 2 days her own breath felt borrowed from somewhere honest. She slept against the wall of the shed with Calum's weight warm beside her shoulder. She did not sleep well, but she slept, and in the dark, somewhere between one breath and the next, the suppressor brand on her neck pulsed a second time, faintly. Like something turning over in its sleep, like something old, locked in a small room for 6 years, beginning quietly to wonder what was on the other side of the door. She did not sleep so much as wait. The hours between midnight and the first grey smear of morning passed in a kind of held breath, her back against the shed wall, Calum's warmth steady at her hip, her ears tuned to every shift outside, a branch creaking, the mill creek moving over its stones, the distant cough of a dog 3 streets over. She ran the situation through her mind the way she used to run a difficult diagnosis. Symptoms, causes, what you could actually do. The symptoms were ugly. 5 Duskmere wolves knew exactly where she was. They would come back. They would come back with more men, or with a magistrate, or with both. She had no pack protection, no legal standing beyond a market receipt scribbled on a torn corner, no money. No allies in Millhaven except a candlemaker who had given her a shed key out of kindness and would not thank her for bringing this to her door. The causes were uglier. She had bought something that belonged to people with more power than her, which had been true of most of her decisions lately. What she could do, she had not yet worked out. By the time the gray under the door turned pale gold, she had decided exactly one thing. She was not opening the door when they came back. They came back at dawn, not 3 wolves this time, 5. She counted their boots from the sound before she even stood up. Calum was awake instantly, on his feet before she was, and the shift in the shed's atmosphere when 5 dominant wolves lined up outside a small space was a physical thing, a pressure that compressed the air, a weight that pushed against the inside of her ribs. Open the door, Elara, a different voice, older, flatter. She placed it the way you place a song you used to know. Cyrus Wren, second under Brennan Hale in the enforcer line. She had set the bone in his son's leg 3 summers ago. This is going to go badly for you if you make it difficult. It's already going badly for me. Open doors won't improve that. She heard low murmurings outside, a brief exchange she could not pass. Then Cyrus again, quieter, aimed at the door crack like a confidence. Listen, whatever you think you're doing, this wolf is not what it looks like. You don't know what you've got in there with you. Walk away from it and I'll tell Theron you cooperated. That matters for your petition, the formal dissolution of a rejection bond. The only legal way to remove a suppressor brand without a new mate claim. It took months. Required the original rejecting Alpha's signature. Theron's signature. She breathed carefully through her nose. I'm not walking away. And I'm not opening this door. And if you break it down in Millhaven Market District at dawn, the magistrate is going to have questions about why 5 Duskmere wolves are forcing entry over what the market record shows as a legally purchased animal. Silence. Longer this time. Then boots on the path, moving away. All 5 sets. She stayed exactly where she was until she could not hear them anymore. She turned around. Calum was watching her with that expression she was beginning to learn. The one that was not quite readable but had something underneath it working very hard. He had been listening to every word. She could tell from the way his attention had tracked the voices. They're going to come back with documentation, or go to the magistrate themselves and file a counterclaim on the sale. I bought you legally, but I can't prove what they were doing to you. And without that, she stopped, pressed her fingers to her eyes for a moment. I need to think. Calum made a low sound, effortful, the kind of sound that meant he was pushing against the ceiling mark to get a word out. She could see the tension in his jaw. A single word emerged, shaped carefully around whatever was blocking it. Leave. She looked at him. He held her gaze and said it again. Leave you. You want me to leave? He shook his head. A hard, short movement. Tried. You leave? Safe. You want me to leave so I'm safe. He dipped his head once. And what happens to you? No answer. Which was an answer. No, she said simply. He made a sound of frustration, fully animal. A low rumble that was almost a warning. She held up one hand, did not back away from it. I heard you. The answer is still no. So we need a different plan. The plan came from a direction she had not expected. Merith Fenn arrived at the shed door just after sunrise with a covered pot of something that smelled like barley and onion. Knocked twice in the pattern she had established when she gave Elara the key. Waited. Elara opened the door 6 inches. Marith looked at her. Looked past her at Calum with the calm of a woman who had run a market stall for 30 years and had not been startled by anything in a long time. Looked back at Elara. Brennan Hale was at my stall at first light asking about my shed. He was very polite about it. I was also very polite about it. She held out the covered pot. Eat something. Elara took the pot. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring this to your. Don't apologize to me. I gave you the key. That was a choice. Marith's eyes flicked past her to Calum's wrist. The faded edge of the ceiling mark just visible above his sleeve. That wolf has a suppressor mark older than I am, the kind of mark only crown work leaves. You can see that from here? I ran a market stall for 30 years. I see everything. Merith folded her hands in front of her, the way she did before delivering an unpleasant total at the end of a sale. Brennan is going to the magistrate this morning. You have until midday before there's a formal order. Maybe less, I know. There's an old Wayfarer's Road 3 miles east that bypasses the magistrate's jurisdiction entirely. Once you're past the 2nd milestone marker, Millhaven law can't touch you. Elara stared at her. Merith's expression did not change. My nephew doesn't actually need the shed back for another month. I may have told you 2 weeks so you'd have a reason to keep moving. I should have been honest about that. Why are you doing this? Meredith looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that took inventory of a person and did not flinch from what it found. Because Brennan came to my stall, at first light, asking about a woman who bought a wolf with her last coins to keep it from being destroyed. And I don't want to live in a town where that's the wrong answer to a question. She picked up her empty pot carrier. Go east, today. Before midday, she walked back toward the market without looking back. They were packed and moving within the hour. There was not much to pack. Elara's coat, the herb bundle, the tinderbox, a water skin she had refilled at the Mill Creek. She kept her hands moving and would not let herself think too far ahead, because thinking ahead was a luxury for people with options. Calum walked beside her, not behind, not ahead, beside. She noticed it the same way she had noticed it last night and the morning before. There was something deliberate about it that she didn't have the words for yet. A mile east of Millhaven, the cobblestones gave way to packed dirt and the town noise thinned behind them, and a sound cut through the morning that brought them both to a stop. A horn, Millhaven's magistrate horn, the signal for an official pursuit order. Hours earlier than midday, Brennan had moved faster than she expected. Elara looked at the road ahead, looked at Calum. He was already scanning, not the road, the tree line north of the path, the ridge beyond it, the low ground south, those layered eyes moving in the deliberate arcs she had first seen on the auction block. Then he stopped scanning, turned, looked at her directly, and something in his expression had shifted. The calculation was still there. Underneath it was something else. Something that looked almost like a decision being made and accepted in the same beat. He turned north toward the tree line, looked back at her over his shoulder. Through the trees, she said. He held her gaze, off the road, away from the jurisdiction line. We'd have to camp. She looked at the forest, looked at him. You know where you're going. He turned north again and simply began walking. She followed. The horn sounded twice more behind them and then faded as the trees closed in, the sound swallowed by old growth and distance. And Elara kept walking and did not look back at Millhaven, and tried very hard not to think about how completely her life had changed in 72 hours. They walked for the rest of that day and most of the next. The forest was old in a way that felt witnessed. Trees thick enough that two grown men with their arms outstretched could not have circled them. Moss soft underfoot, light coming down green and gold through canopies that had probably been canopies before any pack had drawn a border in this dirt. She established certain facts as they went. Calum was getting stronger. Not quickly, not dramatically, but each morning the quality of his movement was marginally better than the day before, and the fresh wound on his flank was closing cleanly, which she checked every evening with the impersonal efficiency of someone who had learned to keep her healer's hand separate from everything else she was feeling. He was an extraordinarily poor patient. He did not rest when she told him to rest. He did not stay still when she was treating him. He moved when he decided to move. Her instructions were considered, then evaluated on their individual merits, which was infuriating. She was talking to him more than she had talked to anyone in months, not always in words, because speech still cost him effort, but in attention. Full and complete and unsettling attention. When she spoke, he listened in a way that made her feel like every word was being recorded somewhere it would matter, and, which she was least comfortable with, she had stopped feeling afraid of him somewhere around the end of the second day in the trees. She was not entirely sure when it had happened or what to do about it. On the morning of the fourth day in the forest, she woke before him for the first time. He was on his side near the banked fire, the rise and fall of his breathing slow and deep, genuinely asleep, not the watchful half-rest of the first nights. She looked at him for a moment. In sleep, his face had lost its constant layer of calculation, and what remained was simply a face. Strong-featured, travel-worn, younger than she had somehow assumed. She got up quietly and went to check the snare she had set the night before. 2 rabbits. She cleaned them, set them over the rebuilt fire with the last of her dried herbs and water from the nearby stream. When she turned around, Calum was sitting up, watching her with an expression she could not read. "Morning," she said. He dipped his head. She crouched by the fire and turned the spit and thought about what she had been thinking about since before dawn. "I want to talk to you about something." He waited. "You're stronger, I can see it. Another week, maybe less, and you'll be able to sustain a full shift whether the suppressor mark allows it or not. Your body is overcoming it." She kept her eyes on the fire. which means you don't actually need me anymore. In a practical sense, silence. So I want to say clearly, so there's no confusion that you don't owe me anything. For the 3 coins, for the bandaging, for any of it. She finally looked at him. When you're ready to go, you go. I mean that. No debt, no claim. Calum looked at her steadily. Do you understand what I'm saying? She asked. Yes, good. She turned back to the fire. Right. Well, breakfast first. She woke the next morning to find the door of the lean-to she had built against a fallen oak standing wide open. She had opened it, in the night. Apparently, she had gotten up, unlatched it, pushed it fully open, and had no memory of doing so. She stood in the open doorway in the early grey light and looked at the open space beyond and at Calum, who was sitting 6 feet away, watching her with an expression of patient attention. Did I do that? She asked. Nothing, I did that. Well, you can go, right now, if you want. I'm not going to. He sat down. She stared at him. He sat with the unhurried, settled weight of a mountain that had always been a mountain and saw no reason to change that fact. Calum. He looked at her. I'm serious, he continued, looking at her. I'm pointing at the forest. That is the forest. You could be in it in 30 seconds. Gone. Free, that is what I am telling you. He looked at the forest, looked back at her, and with the air of someone exercising great patience with a person who was not quite grasping something obvious, he settled his weight more firmly. You are the most aggravating. She stopped, pressed her fingers to her forehead, breathed. Fine, fine, stay. But don't think I'm not serious about the no-debt thing, because I am. She turned and went back inside to rebuild the fire and tried to ignore the fact that she was, slightly and inexplicably, relieved. His speech improved that afternoon, not suddenly. In increments. The ceiling mark cracking at its edges the way ice cracks in spring, giving way to warmth one fault a line at a time. He went from single words to 2-word combinations too. By the time she was checking his wound at dusk, actual sentences. Short, careful, stripped of anything unnecessary. But sentences. The first full one he said to her was, "You should not have bought me." She had heard variations of this before. You keep saying that. It becomes more true each day. He watched her hands working on the bandaging with that characteristic attention. You don't understand what following me means. I'm not following you. I'm walking in the same direction. A pause. That is the same thing. It really isn't. She tied off the fresh dressing. Who suppressed you? Was it your own pack's doing? Or my old counsel's? She went still. Your counsel's. My second. His voice was flat, uninflected. The way she had learned meant the topic cost him something. He wanted the position I hold. The suppression was to prevent me from being able to fight back. The harvest wounds were to weaken what remained. A pause. He sold me through intermediaries. He did not expect me to survive long enough to reach an auction block. But you did. I did. She sat back and looked at him properly. What position do you hold? He met her gaze and said nothing. She read his face, the deliberate quiet, the way he had phrased it, the position I hold, not my rank, not my role. The distance he put between the words and himself. As though the answer was so large he could not hold it casually. She thought about the surgical precision of the harvest wounds, the quality of the suppressor mark on his wrist. She had seen that design in a textbook once, an old one, the kind held only in formal pack libraries. She thought about his eyes. She thought about a feeling she had been pushing aside for several days. It's a high position, she said carefully. He said nothing. Very high, still nothing. She let it sit. She would come back to it. Instead, she asked, "Your second. Does he know you're alive? He will soon. He will have people looking." He paused, "Which is why I should not still be here. And yet, he agreed quietly. And there was something in the way he said it that she did not examine. They reached the Wayfarer's Road on the morning of the 9th day. It was wider than she remembered from her studies, deeply rutted from generations of carts, patched in places where some Lord's road crew had remembered the route existed and then forgotten again. They followed it east at a careful distance, more parallel than on it. A notice had been nailed to the trunk of an oak just within the tree line. She read it twice, by order of the Crown Pack Authority. All unregistered wolves within the Eastern Territories were required to present for identification before the authorities' enforcer within 48 hours of this notice's posting. Failure to comply carried a sentence of permanent suppression for the wolf and a charge of harboring for their keeper. No exceptions, no extensions. She turned around. Calum had already read it over her shoulder. He was taller. She had grown accustomed to his presence at her back. It no longer startled her, and his expression had gone very still in the particular way she had learned meant he was running calculations at speed. 48 hours. Yes. Enforcer. Crown authority. She looked at the notice again. That's not a local authority. That's direct Crown reach. Yes, they're looking for you specifically. He was quiet for a moment. They are looking for any wolf that might be me. They don't know where I am. But if an enforcer looks at you, they will know immediately. She folded the notice, put it in her coat pocket, thought about it for the 30 seconds she allowed herself. Then she asked, "Is there anything between permanent suppression and being presented to an enforcer?" Calum looked at her with something careful moving in his eyes. "There is one thing. A bonded servant declaration. If a wolf is formally registered as bonded to a keeper, the enforcer's authority to seize them is suspended pending the keeper's consent." He paused. "It is a legal status, old law, still binding. How does one file a bonded servant declaration? It requires a keeper's verbal claim in front of the enforcer directly. No documentation needed. The keeper assumes full legal responsibility." Another pause. "Every time, it would make you a target. I'm already a target. Brennan Hale has my description filed with the Millhaven magistrate." She met his gaze. "Would it work? Legally, would it actually hold?" "It would hold." He paused. "The enforcer would mark you in his record, and you would be bound to present me if commanded by Crown authority within 30 days. He looked at her steadily. "Elara, what? You understand what I'm asking you to take on?" "You're not asking, I'm deciding." She put the folded notice deeper in her pocket. "We need to find where the enforcer is holding his inspections." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said with a careful precision that felt like it was working around something larger, "You are very strange." She looked up at him. "You said that like it's a compliment." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. She wasn't sure she had seen him smile yet, but the beginning of one, or the memory of one. It appeared and was gone in under a second. "It was," he said, "the enforcer's inspection post was a converted way station at a crossroads on the old eastern route. A squat stone building with Crown authority banners hanging limp in the still morning air. 2 wolves in formal pack guard livery standing at the entrance with the bored alertness of men who expected no real trouble. Elara stood at the tree line 100 yards out and studied it. How many inside? 4 more. 2 guards, 1 record keeper. The enforcer himself." She glanced at him. "You can tell that from here. I can smell that from here." He said it without particular emphasis. "A simple statement of capacity then. My range is returning. The suppressor mark is losing hold faster than expected." She filed that away. "All right, we go in calm. You seem to be 1 step behind me and let me speak first. If he asks you direct questions, answer simply. Name, origin, status, nothing more." She paused. "What name are you using?" "A beat, Calum." "Calum what?" "Another beat. Slightly longer." "Calum Ashford." She looked at him sidelong. He returned her look with complete composure. "Fine. Calum Ashford. Bonded to Elara. I'll use my full name for the record. Ready? You don't have to do this. I know." She walked out of the tree line. The enforcer's name, according to the placard on his table, was Cedric Vaughan. He was a broad man in his 50s with the build of someone who had once been physically formidable and had settled into a comfortable authority. He had pale eyes that moved with professional efficiency over everyone who came through his door, cataloging and discarding in the same gesture. They moved over Elara, paused on the suppressor brand at her neck, moved to Calum, stayed there. Elara spoke before the pause could lengthen into something actionable. "Elara Thorne, key. Presenting my bonded servant for registration per the authority's notice." She kept her voice level, hands still at her sides. "Calum Ashford, unregistered. Eastern Territory. Under my bond and care." Cedric Vaughan looked at Calum for another long moment. Calum stood 1 step behind her left shoulder, said nothing. Looked at approximately the middle distance with the expression of a man who was making a considered effort to appear unremarkable. It was, Elara thought, almost convincing. "How long has he been bonded to you?" 11 days. The bond was established in Millhaven Market. The sale is on record with the market auctioneer." Cedric Vaughan stood. He was not a short man, but Calum was taller. When Vaughan crossed to stand in front of him, the height difference was noticeable. "Look at me." Calum looked at him. Elara breathed carefully through her nose and did not move. Vaughan studied his face. Calum returned the study with calm piled. The room was very quiet. The record keeper's quill had stopped moving. "Origin, Northern Territory. Border region. Pack disbanded 3 years ago. Vaughn was quiet for another moment. Then he turned and walked back to his table and sat down, and Elara let out a breath so carefully it made no sound. "I'll register the bond," Vaughn said, pulling a ledger toward him. He wrote without looking up. "Keeper's name on record. Wolf's name on record. You are legally bound to present him to Crown Authority within 30 days if summoned." He looked up. "You understand the penalties for harboring an unregistered wolf under false bond, I do. Good." He closed the ledger. His pale eyes went to her neck again, to the brand and then to Calum, and something moved briefly in his expression. Not suspicion. Something more like arithmetic. "You may go." They went. They were 300 yards from the way station and moving into the tree line before Elara's hands started shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs and kept walking and told herself it was the cold. It was not particularly cold. Calum said nothing for a quarter mile. Then, "You held very well. Don't compliment me right now. I'm still calculating how badly that could have gone." It didn't go badly, it almost did. He almost knew. She stopped walking and turned to look at him. He almost knew, Calum. I could see him working it out, and then choosing not to, which means either we were lucky, or he decided for his own reasons to let it go. And I don't know which one that was, and both of them bother me. He looked at her steadily. It was the second one. She stared at him. "You know why he let it go. He recognized me. He chose not to act on it. The forest was very quiet around them. He recognized you. Cedric Vaughn served under my father for 6 years. He retired from Crown service before my second came to power." Calum held her gaze. "He is not my enemy." Elara stood in the middle of the forest path and looked at him and felt the edges of something very large pressing in around the conversation. The thing she had not yet named. The thing that had been sitting in her chest since the gold over silver eyes had stayed on her face across the auction crowd. "Calum," she said carefully. "Yes, your second. The one who suppressed you and sold you and is looking for you." She kept her voice even. "What title does he hold right now? While you're gone, he was quiet." "What title?" she said again. "Does your second hold, acting Alpha King, until my return or my confirmed death?" The words landed in the silence of the forest like stones into still water. Elara did not say anything for a long moment. "Acting Alpha King, which means you are..." "Yes." She closed her eyes, opened them. The forest looked exactly the same as it had a minute ago, which seemed unreasonable. "You're the Alpha King, yes." She looked at him. He looked back at her with the expression of a man who had been waiting for a particular conversation to arrive and had made his peace with its arrival and was now simply standing in it. "For 11 days, she said, "I have been calling you the beast." A pause in my head, she clarified. Not aloud. Mostly something crossed his face. That thing that was not quite a smile but was in the same family. "Here and gone." "I know," she pointed at him. "You don't get to look almost amused right now. You lied to me. I did not lie. I withheld. That is the same thing." "It is not the same thing," he said. And she heard her own words from days ago return to her with perfect calm and felt a flash of irritation so sharp it almost made her laugh. She did not laugh. She turned and started walking. Because standing still while this settled felt impossible. He fell into step beside her. She did not speak to him for 2 hours. Not as punishment. She was not built for punishing silences. They cost too much. But because she genuinely needed the time to reorganize everything she understood about the last 11 days against what she now knew, the way he had scanned the market square. The suppressor marks design from a formal pack library text. The surgical precision of the harvest wounds. They had not been harvesting alpha essence. They had been harvesting royal essence, the most potent and valuable substance in the known pack world. Cedric Vaughn's careful chosen silence, the way Calum moved, the quality of his stillness, the manner of his attention. She had been a healer for 6 years. She had read people for a living. She had missed it completely. Again that thought arrived with an unpleasant familiarity. "I should have seen it," she said. "Not really to him. No one was meant to see it. You read illness and injury. You read pain." He paused. "You were not looking for a king in a market auction because there was no reason to look for one. That is not a failure of observation. That is a reasonable assumption about the world." She glanced at him. "You could not have known, and I could not tell you. Anyone sheltering me becomes a target for my second's people. The less you knew, the more expendable I was if they found us," she said. A pause. "The safer you were." That is a very royal way to describe leaving someone uninformed in a dangerous situation. He was quiet for a moment. "It is. I am aware that it is. Another pause. I am sorry for it. She looked at him sharply, because she had not expected that. Not the deflection of a man used to authority. A plain apology, undecorated. He met her look with no particular defense. She breathed out through her nose and walked on. Decided she would accept the apology later, when she had finished being irritated. They camped early that evening. She was tired in a way that went deeper than her legs, the bone-deep exhaustion of sustained tension releasing all at once. She built the fire. He sat across from it, and she found herself studying his face in the firelight with the directness she had been mostly avoiding. He was watching her do it without comment. How long? She asked. He understood the question. The coup was 11 days before the market. I was suppressed in my own council chamber by people I had trusted for years. Something moved across his face and was controlled. I woke in a harvest facility 2 days later. They were all ready. The wounds, the second session, he said. They moved quickly. She was quiet for a moment. You were afraid, not a question. A healer's reading. He looked at the fire. I was, at first. Then I was angry. Anger is more useful. She almost smiled. I know something about that. He looked back at her. And something in the firelight caught his eyes at an angle that made the gold over silver visible, even now. Even in his human form. She had grown used to his eyes over 11 days. The specific quality of them still caught her off guard sometimes. The sense of depth, of something very old looking out. She looked away first, which she told herself was simply because the fire needed tending. She was almost asleep, coat pulled up, fire a low steady warmth when she heard him speak. Quiet, directed at the fire rather than at her. The way people spoke when they were not sure if they were speaking aloud on purpose. You asked me several days ago why I stayed when you told me to go. She kept her eyes closed, kept her breathing even. I told myself it was practical, that I was too weak to survive alone, that the suppressor mark needed time, that your cover was useful. A long pause. Those things were true. The fire crackled. They were not the only true things. Silence. She kept her eyes closed and her breathing even and said nothing. Because something told her that if she responded, he would stop. And she was not ready for him to stop, but he said nothing more. After a while, she genuinely slept. In her dream, she was in a great hall. Stone floors, high rafters, and wolves, dozens of them, enormous silver and black and gray, arranged in a formal circle, heads bowed. Every one of them. At the center of the circle, a throne. At the throne, a wolf she recognized. The wolf turned its head and looked directly at her with layered gold over silver eyes. She woke up gasping, heart hammering. The pre-dawn dark pressing in around the camp. She turned her head. Calum was awake, watching the tree line. She looked at him. Looked away, no, she told herself firmly. Anxiety dream, that's all. She lay back down and stared at the canopy above and very deliberately did not think about thrones. But her eye caught something at the far edge of the camp. A notice nailed to a tree she had not camped near last night, which meant someone had been close enough in the dark to nail it. Without waking either of them, she crossed to it. Read it. Her stomach dropped. It was not an authority notice. It was a bounty notice, hand-lettered, not official, the kind distributed through black market channels. At the top, a face sketched in ink, Calum's face, and below it in plain language, alive only, substantial reward. Inquire at Duskmere Pack Authority, Eastern Reach Office, her former pack, her former mate's pack. Theron's people were working with Calum's traitorous second. She turned around. Calum had already read it over her shoulder. His face was perfectly still. They know we're in this region. Yes, they were close enough last night to nail that to a tree. Yes. She looked at him. How long have we got, whores? Maybe less. She folded the notice, put it in her pocket next to the authority one, and started breaking camp. Her hands, she noted with something like satisfaction, were not shaking this time. Somewhere south of where she stood, on a road she had walked once as a healer's apprentice, with no idea what she was walking past, a man whose name she had not yet learned was lighting another candle in a room without windows and adjusting a number on a parchment. The count on his record had moved. 18 days gone, 12 left. The math was tightening, and the woman who had spent 3 coins in an alley to keep a stranger alive was now the only thing standing between him and a quiet final session in a facility designed to leave no body to bury. She would learn his name 2 days from now, in a market town called Ashford's Cross, when she found a different notice on a different board, and the last piece of who she was traveling with fell into place with a sound like a door closing on a room she could not unenter. She did not know that yet. She tightened the straps on her pack and turned east. They moved north and east and said little. Elara broke camp in under 10 minutes. They were back in the trees before the frost had fully lifted from the ground. What she was thinking about behind the route planning and the listening for pursuit was Theron. 6 years. She had known him for 6 years, had healed his pack members, managed his territory's medical stores. Sat beside him at every formal gathering with her hand on his thigh, because that was what mates did at formal gatherings. She had understood him, she had thought, as well as she understood anyone. And he had rejected her in a public circle and immediately aligned himself with a political coup against the crown. Not because he believed in the coup. She knew Theron well enough to know he had no ideology beyond his own advancement. He had aligned with Calum second because someone had made it worth his while. A pack elevation, probably. New territory. Something that made publicly humiliating his mate of 6 years look like a reasonable trade. She put the thought away. It was not useful right now. By mid-morning, they had put 4 miles between themselves and the camp, moving parallel to the Wayfarers' Road but staying inside the tree line. Calum was navigating by something she could not access. Scent, she assumed, or some deeper territorial instinct, leading them around low ground and toward higher, drier terrain where tracks would be harder to follow. She was watching his back and thinking about pace when he stopped. Sudden and complete, the way he stopped when his senses caught something hers could not. What town? Half a mile east. She had not known there was a town this far off the Wayfarers' Road. How large, small market town. He was quiet for a moment, reading something on the air. Weekly market today. She thought about it. Supplies, we need them. We're down to nothing. It's a risk. Everything is a risk. She came to stand beside him. Looked through the trees east toward the faint distant sound of commerce. I'll go alone. You stay in the tree line. He turned to look at her. She read the objection in his face before it reached his mouth. You have a bounty notice with your face on it circulating through Duskmer channels. She met his gaze. I have a suppressor brand and no money and the general appearance of a woman who has been sleeping in forests, which is unremarkable in a market town. I'll be 20 minutes. He was quiet for a moment. 30. If you're not back in 30, I come find you. I know. She turned east. Don't move from this spot. The town was called Ashford's Cross according to the carved sign at its edge, and its market was exactly as advertised. Small, weekly. The kind of market where everyone knew everyone and a stranger's face was noticed but not immediately suspicious. Elara moved through it efficiently. A woman named Bess Tarrant ran the dried provisions stall and sold her a week's worth of travel food, hard cheese, dried meat, oatcakes, for the 3 copper coins she'd found in her coat lining the day before, and a trade of her grandmother's ring, which she made without letting herself think about it. She was turning to leave when she saw the board. Every market town had a posting board, announcements, lost livestock, debt notices. She walked past them without looking, as a rule, had been walking past them without looking for the past 3 weeks. Something made her stop. She turned back. There were 3 notices on the board, a lost mule, a debt summons, and a third notice, larger than the others, printed rather than hand-lettered, bearing the Crown Authority seal at its top. She read it. She read it again. The market noise continued around her. Voices, cartwheels, someone haggling over the price of salt, and Elara stood very still in the middle of it and read the notice a 3rd time, because she needed to be certain she was reading it correctly. By Crown Authority. Missing, Calum Ashford, Alpha King of the Western and Eastern Pack Territories. Missing from the royal seat 11 days. Any information regarding his whereabouts to be reported immediately to the nearest Crown Authority post. Reward. 500 gold sovereigns. Below the text a portrait sketch. Formal, precise. Done from official records. His face, unmistakably, completely, with no possible alternate interpretation. His face. Alpha King, not a high-ranking wolf, not a council member, not a regional pack leader. Alpha King, 500 gold sovereigns was more money than Elara could conceptualize in a single number. It was the kind of reward that ended wars. She stood at the posting board and breathed and looked at the sketch of the face she had been looking at across a campfire for the past 11 nights and felt the last 11 days rearrange themselves around this fact. Like furniture being moved in a room she thought she had known, the market square in Millhaven. Calum in chains, scanning for exits with cold professional precision, not a wolf in panic, a king in captivity, assessing his options. Knowing her name before she had told him, Of course he had known her name. She had been a registered healer in a pack territory under Crown jurisdiction. He had access to every pack's records, choosing not to shift back to human form even when he was strong enough to. Because a large injured wolf attracted less scrutiny than a large injured man with a face on a Crown authority notice, staying when she had told him to go, not because he had nowhere else. Because moving through open territory alone with a bounty on his head was more dangerous than staying with cover. Or the thought arrived quietly. She did not examine it, because he had chosen to stay. She folded the notice with hands that were completely steady and put it in her coat pocket with the others, and stood for a moment in the market square with her eyes closed. Then she walked back to the forest. He was exactly where she had left him. He was watching her face as she came through the trees. She knew he could read something in it: scent, tension, the specific quality of her silence, because she saw the moment his expression changed. The calculation sharpening, the preparation. She stopped in front of him. She reached into her coat pocket. She held up the Crown authority notice with his face on it. He looked at it, looked at her. She waited. His expression did not become defensive or apologetic or explanatory. He simply looked at her with the steady, even attention she had come to associate with him at his most honest, and waited in return. She lowered the notice. "The Alpha King," she said. "Yes, not a council member, not a regional leader. The Alpha Kings." She looked at him for a long moment. "You let me call you the Beast for 11 days. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not the moment for it. He appeared to know it. It was controlled almost instantly. "How long," she said, very evenly, "were you going to wait before telling me?" "Until you were safely out of my second's reach. The less you knew, the more expendable I was," she said. "We've had this conversation, the safer." "Don't." She held up one hand. "Don't give me the royal version. Give me the honest one, silence." He looked at the hand she had raised and then at her face, and something in his expression shifted beneath its surface. The way deep water moves under ice. "I did not know how to tell you." She blinked. "I have been who I am for my entire life," he said. "I have never been in a situation in which I needed to explain it to someone who already knew me as something else. And you already knew me." He paused. "As the Beast." Apparently, she stared at him. "In your head," he added. "Mostly." She made a sound. It was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob, and somewhere in the middle. She pressed her fingers over her mouth. He watched her with careful attention. She breathed, removed her fingers, looked at him. "You knew my name before I told you yes. You have my pack records. Every registered healer in Crown territory. Yes. You stayed when I told you to go." A pause. "Yes. Was that tactical? Was that because moving alone was more dangerous?" A longer pause. "It was. Among other things, she held his gaze and he held hers, and the forest was very quiet and neither of them elaborated on what the other things were. She looked down at the notice in her hand. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She was angry, not afraid, not overwhelmed, not reverent, angry. "You let me stand in front of Cedric Vaughn and lie to a Crown enforcer for you. You let me use my last coins to buy you at auction. You let me argue with Duskmere wolves through a closed door while you sat next to me and said nothing about what you were." Her voice was completely level. "And you are going to tell me all of it now. Not parts, all of it right now. Starting with your second's name." He looked at her. "His name. And how many men he has, and what his plan is, and what your plan is, and why my former pack is involved, and every single other thing you have been carrying that you decided I didn't need to know." She held his gaze without blinking. "I spent my last 3 coins on you. I have earned the truth." The forest held its breath. Then Calum said, "His name is Roderick Vale." And he told her everything. It took an hour. She sat across from him on a fallen log and listened without interrupting, which cost her something. But she managed it. She listened to the structure of the coup. Roderick had spent 2 years building alliances among the lesser pack councils, promising elevated status and territorial concessions in exchange for silence and cooperation when the time came. Theron Vance's Duskmere pack was one of 14 who had agreed to look the other way. She listened to the harvest operation. Roderick had needed Calum's royal essence not just to weaken him, to produce a substance that could be used to forge Crown authority seals. With enough of it, Roderick could issue orders that appeared to come from the king's own mark. He had been building a stockpile. She listened to the timeline. Roderick had given himself 30 days to confirm Calum's death before formally declaring a succession crisis and positioning himself as interim king. 11 days had been gone when she bought Calum at auction. They were now well into day 18. 12 days left. When he was finished, she sat quietly for a moment. Your loyal generals, the ones who don't know where you are. 3. Wulfric Reed in the Northern Territory. Armand Solis at the Eastern Coast Garrison. Bertrand Allard, who was out of the capital when the coup happened and has been unreachable since. Do they know you're alive? No. Can we reach them in 12 days? He was quiet for a moment. Wulfric Reed is 8 days travel north. That is our best option, she nodded. Stood up. Then we go north. He looked up at her. Elara, she looked at him. I am sorry, he said it genuinely. For all of it. A pause. You deserved the truth from the beginning. She looked at him for a long moment. You're going to make it up to me, she said, by getting me to Wulfric Reed alive, and then reclaiming your throne, and then dissolving the Duskmere Pact's political standing so that Theron Vance has to petition the Alpha Council for basic territorial rights for the next decade. She picked up her pack. That will be a good start. Something crossed Calum's face. Fully this time. Not the corner of the mouth almost. An actual complete expression of something warm and startled and genuine. She turned north before she could look at it too long. Come on. 12 days he stood, and fell into step beside her. And for the first time since the auction, the silence between them felt like something chosen rather than maintained. They moved north for 2 more days through gentler terrain. Calum's strength was returning in visible increments now. The suppressor mark on his wrist had faded from a clean burn scar to something almost indistinct. The seal losing integrity the way all forced suppressions eventually did when the wolf inside was strong enough and given enough time. She watched it during wound checks. Could see the mark retreating like a tide going out. On the morning of the 3rd day after the Alpha King conversation, she reached for his wrist to check it, and his hand closed gently around her fingers before she could pull back. She looked up. He was looking at her hand in his, then at her face, with an expression she had no clean category for. It's almost gone. Yes, he did not release her hand immediately. Then he did, 2 more days perhaps. Good, that's good. She went back to breaking camp and told herself her pulse had elevated because of the cold. On the morning of the 4th day, they came down out of higher terrain onto an old livestock route, wide enough for 2 carts, patched with centuries of use, and Elara felt the specific relief of a surface that did not fight her feet. Half a mile along the route they found the way station. It was a standard crown way station. Stone building about the size of Meredith's shed, maintained for crown messengers and official travelers, stocked with basic supplies and a fire grate, theoretically open to any traveler. In practice visited primarily by people who had official business being on the road. The door was standing open. Elara slowed. Calum was already still beside her. Someone's inside recent. An hour ago, maybe less. He was reading the air with focused attention. One person. Female. She's still there. They exchanged a look. We need the supplies. Yes. And a fire would be, it would be good. So we go in. Yes, he paused. But I go first? She let him. The woman inside was sitting on the floor beside a cold fire grate with her back against the wall and her knees drawn up. She looked up when they entered with the expression of someone who had moved past startled and landed in exhausted. She was older than Elara by perhaps a decade, weathered and sharp-featured, with the particular stillness of someone trained to assess threat quickly. She looked at Calum, looked at Elara, looked at Calum again, then she said, "Very controlled, my king." The words landed in the small stone room like something dropped from a height. Elara looked at Calum. Calum was looking at the woman with an expression that had gone through several rapid stages and settled on something between relief and caution. Lyra. The woman, Lyra Blackthorn, apparently pressed her fist to her chest in a formal gesture and then dropped it. "You're alive. Bertrand Allard has been..." She stopped, reorganized. "Allard sent me. He's been tracking Roderick's movements for 9 days. He didn't know where you were, only that you weren't dead." Her eyes moved to the faded mark on his wrist. "Suppressed, was," Calum said. "Almost fully broken now," Lyra nodded. Her eyes went to Elara with the direct cataloging attention of someone who gathered information professionally. "And this is Elara Thorne," Elara said before Calum could frame the introduction in whatever formal or strategic terms he was preparing. "I bought him at a market auction. He was 2 days from dying." A pause. "That is accurate," he said. Another pause. Something shifted in Lyra's expression, not softening exactly, more like a recalculation completing. "I see," she said. in a tone that suggested she saw considerably more than the words indicated. She looked back at Elara. "Then you have my gratitude and my king's." "I expect, though he'll be formal about it." "He is very formal about things," Elara agreed. Calum said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Lyra Blackthorn was, it emerged over the next hour, one of Bertrand Allard's senior scouts. Not a fighter, an information gatherer, which in Lyra's case appeared to mean she knew approximately everything. She laid it out with efficient precision while Elara built the fire and Calum sat across from Lyra with his full attention locked on her words. Roderick had moved faster than expected. He had already dispatched a formal announcement to the Outer Pack territories, stating that the king had suffered a sudden illness and was in seclusion. A story that would hold for perhaps another 10 days before the lesser councils began demanding proof of life. He had installed 2 of his allied pack leaders on the Royal Council in interim positions. He had, critically, been unable to produce a confirmed death, which was the one thing preventing him from moving to formal succession. "Wulfric Reed," Calum said. "What's his position secure?" "Reed doesn't believe the illness story. He's been quietly pulling his forces south toward the capital for 6 days. He's waiting for confirmation that you're alive before he moves openly." She paused. "If you can reach him or get word to him, he'll move within 48 hours. How far is Reed's current position from here? 4 days hard travel, 2.5 if you shift." Calum and Elara looked at each other. "Your mark," she said. 2 more days, he said, "perhaps 1. Then 4 days walking until you can shift. And then you can close the distance faster." She thought about it. "That still works. That's within the 12 days. Lyra was watching this exchange with the focused attention of someone filing every detail. "She's running your timeline. She runs most things," Calum said, with a flatness that was not quite flat enough to be truly flat. Elara decided not to examine that sentence. Lyra left at dusk. She had information to carry, routes to maintain, a network of contacts that needed to know the king was alive and moving. She pressed a leather pouch into Elara's hands before she went. Dried provisions, 2 gold coins, a small glass vial. "What's this suspirement neutralizer?" "For his wrist. It'll take the last of the mark off tonight instead of 2 days from now." Her eyes went briefly to the brand on Elara's neck. "I have one for that as well. If you want it." Elara's hand went instinctively to her neck. "That's not." She stopped. "That mark requires a formal dissolution, or a new mate claim. It requires a formal pack authority with jurisdiction over the original sealing. The Alpha King has that jurisdiction over every pack in every territory." She paused, deliberately. If he chose to dissolve it, a silence, Elara was aware without looking at him that Calum was very still. "That's not." She stopped again, chose her words carefully. "That's not necessary right now." "No," Lyra agreed, in a tone that reserved judgment on the word now. She handed Elara the vial. "For his wrist, then." Tonight, she looked at Calum one more time. 4 days to read. "Stay off the livestock route after tomorrow morning. Roderick's people are moving south along it." Then she slipped out the door into the evening and was gone. The fire was good. The provisions were better. Elara ate more than she had in days and felt something in her body gradually unknot. Calum sat across the fire with the vial Lyra had left, turning it in his fingers. "Give it here," Elara said. He passed it across. She unstopped it, moved to sit beside him, took his wrist. The neutralizer smelled like pine resin and something metallic. It went onto the suppressor mark with a small cloth she tore from the hem of her undershirt. The mark dissolved, not dramatically. It simply faded, the burnt edges softening and then disappearing, leaving skin that was slightly paler beneath where it had been. She pressed her thumb gently to the spot where it had been. Smooth, unmarked, she became aware that he was watching her face. She looked up. He was very close. Close enough that the firelight caught the specific layering of his eyes clearly, and she could see in them, undisguised, something that had been there for days, but had not been this visible. She was the one who moved back. Practical distance. Medical distance to done. He was quiet for a moment. "Elara." "Don't," she said, not sharply, gently. "You don't know what I was going to say. I know what you're not going to say. Not tonight. Not while we're still running and you still have a traitorous 2 and 12 days to fix your kingdom." She looked at him steadily. "When this is over, all of it, then we talk. But not in the middle of it." He looked at her for a long moment. "All right?" She nodded, moved back to her side of the fire. "Sleep. We move at first light." He didn't argue, but she was aware, settling into her coat with her back to the fire, that the "not tonight" she had said was different from no, and from the quality of the silence on his side of the fire, he was aware of it too. They were 2 miles north of the way station on the second morning when the route ahead showed fresh tracks. Wolf tracks. Multiple. Heading south, recently made. Calum stopped Roderick's people. Lyra said tomorrow morning. They moved faster. He was reading the tracks with a focus she recognized. 6 wolves. Shifted. Moving at patrol pace, he looked up. They're coming back north. We have perhaps 20 minutes before they reach this point. Off the road, she said immediately. There's no time to get far enough into the tree line. They'll scent us if we're close. She thought fast. Then we don't hide, we go forward. We walk toward them on the road. And we're a keeper and her bonded wolf, traveling north on legal business. Registered with Crown Enforcer Cedric Vaughan at the Eastern Way Station. You're Calum Ashford. You've been my bonded servant for nearly 3 weeks. We have documentation. She held his gaze. These are not Cedric Vaughan, he said. They are Roderick's wolves. They will not choose to let it go. Then we handle that when it happens. She straightened her coat. You walk behind my left shoulder. You answer only what I ask you to answer. And whatever they say to me, you hold. She met his eyes. Can you hold? He held her gaze. And she watched something move through it. Not offense at the question. The specific consideration of a man who understood exactly what she was asking and was answering it honestly. I can hold. She turned and walked toward the sound of approaching wolves. There were 6, as he had said, shifted back to human form now that they were on a traveled road, wearing traveling clothes over the specific physical bearing of trained pack fighters. Their leader was a broad man with a scar across his jaw who looked at Elara with the practiced suspicion of someone paid to be suspicious. Roads restricted north of this point. Crown Authority order. Where are you headed? Northway Station. I have a healer's appointment with the garrison at Harrow's Field. Standing arrangement. She said it with the flat certainty of someone reciting a fact rather than constructing a story. We're registered with Enforcer Vaughan at the Eastern Post. My bonded servant. She gestured behind her without looking. Calum Ashford, Eastern Territory. Bond established at Millhaven Market. The scarred man looked past her at Calum. Calum stood 1 step behind her left shoulder and looked at the middle distance with the complete absence of expression she had come to recognize as his version of invisibility. Not submission, not threat, simply absence. As though the most interesting thing in the vicinity was somewhere else entirely. The scarred man studied him for a long time. Elara did not fill the silence. Filling silence was confession. Healer, the scarred man said finally. What kind of healing? Herbs and poultice work, wound management, some fever treatment. She held his gaze. I'm not a battle healer if that's what you're asking. I have no military application. He looked at her neck, at the brand. She let him look. Rejected Omega healer, the scarred man said, to no one in particular. His tone was not cruel, simply categorizing. Placing her in a box he understood. Yes. He looked at Calum one more time. The scarred jaw worked slightly. She could see him weighing the effort of investigating further against the low-value presentation of what he was looking at. A rejected Omega and her bonded wolf. Unremarkable. Below his mandate, move through quickly. Don't stop before the way station. She nodded once and walked forward, and he stepped aside and she walked past him with Calum 1 step behind her. Did not change her pace or her breathing for 200 yards. Then Calum said very quietly behind her, don't stop walking. I wasn't going to. Third man from the left was looking at me too long. I saw him. He's going to report it.
I know. How long do we have?
If he 4 hours before Roderick's people redirect toward us. If he sends a shifted wolf, too, then we're not going to the Northern Way Station, she said. We cut east off all roads, and we move for Reed directly. That's rough terrain. Yes, I know it is. He was quiet. Calum. Yes, you held a pause. I told you I would. She did not look back at him. Something in her chest settled, quiet and certain, into a place it had been looking for. She turned east off the route into the rough terrain. He followed, and behind them the road lay empty in the morning light, and they did not look back. The terrain east of the route was exactly as difficult as advertised. No paths, ground that rose and fell without pattern, broken by rocky outcrops and sudden drops, streams that had no bridges because no one had ever needed bridges here. Elara's repaired boots held through the first day and began to protest on the second. She stopped once at midday to retie them with a strip of bark. Said nothing about it. Calum said nothing either. He simply moderated his pace without appearing to. so that she was never quite at her limit, she noticed. She did not comment. It had become a kind of language between them, the things they did for each other that neither acknowledged aloud. A grammar of small actions that had built up over nearly 3 weeks into something she had stopped trying to categorize. His suppressor mark was gone entirely now. She could see the change in him, subtle but real. Like a window being opened in a room that had been shut for a long time. The quality of his stillness had shifted from compression to readiness. Something coiled rather than something contained. His senses were operating at full range. She could tell from the way his attention moved. And twice in 2 days he redirected their path without explanation. And twice they later heard or smelled what he had been avoiding. On the third night east, she woke to find him crouched at the edge of their camp with his head tilted slightly. Reading the dark. What is it? Someone is following us. Has been since yesterday morning. She sat up fully. Roderick's people know. His voice was strange, flat in a specific way. The scent is familiar how. He was quiet for a moment. Duskmere Pack, the name landed like a stone. She breathed through it. How many? 1. Moving alone, he paused. I recognized the individual scent. It's been coming up in my tracking since Millhaven. She looked at his profile in the dark. You recognized it in Millhaven, yes, and you didn't tell me. I wasn't certain, and then I was. And he stopped. I didn't want to tell you. She understood then, before he said the name, Theron, yes. She did not sleep again that night. She lay on her back and looked at the canopy and thought about Theron Vance with the particular clarity that came from not trying to feel anything about him. Just examining the facts the way she would examine a wound, looking for the actual shape of the damage. He had followed them, not Roderick's wolves, not a pack-hunting party, him, personally alone. For at least 2 days, Theron was not a tracker by training. He was a political animal, a man who worked through influence and alliance and the careful management of who owed him what. He did not pursue things personally unless the stakes were very specific, which meant this was personal. She thought about the bounty notice. Duskmere Pack Authority Eastern Reach Office. Roderick had made Theron's pack a formal partner in the coup. Theron had accepted, which meant he now had a vested interest in Roderick's success. Which meant he had a vested interest in Calum not reaching Wulfric Reed, but he was following them alone. Which meant either he had not told Roderick's people where they were, which would be strange if he was Roderick's partner, or he wanted to handle this himself before involving Roderick. Why would he want to handle this himself? She turned that question over until dawn. Calum woke her at first light with a hand on her shoulder, which was new. He had always made noise when he needed to wake her. Some sound that gave her the choice of surfacing at her own pace. The hand was direct and warm. She sat up immediately. He's close. She rose and packed in silence, and they moved east without making a fire. By mid-morning, she could feel it too. Not the scent or the tracking, nothing that sophisticated, but the particular prickling awareness of being watched that she had developed over 3 weeks of being hunted. It sat between her shoulder blades. They stopped at noon to water at a stream, and she turned around. Theron was standing 30 feet behind them at the tree line. He looked smaller than she remembered. That was the first thing she noticed, and it startled her. She had been afraid of this man, had built him in the weeks since the rejection into something that occupied more space than one person should. And standing here in a forest clearing, he was simply a man of medium height and medium build, who looked tired and cold, and had been following her through rough terrain for 2 days. He was looking at Calum. Not at her. At Calum. I know who you are. His voice was steady. I've known for several days. When Lara Blackthorn was seen leaving that way station, her face turned up in Roderick's files. He put the pieces together about what she was scouting for. His eyes moved briefly to Elara. He has the Alpha King. She has the Alpha King. He said it like he was still working out what to do with the information. Theron, his eyes moved to her. I'm not here for what you think, then tell me what you're here for. Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man who made a deal with a traitor and is now following the person he publicly destroyed to deliver her to that traitor's people. Something moved across his face. Roderick's people don't know where you are. I didn't tell them. Why not? Calum asked. His voice was quiet and very even. Theron looked at him with the expression of a man addressing something much larger than he had prepared for. Because I made a mistake. Several of them. His eyes went back to Elara. Roderick promised pack elevation, new territory. I believed him. A pause. I also believe that rejecting you that it was straightforward, that you'd petition, find a new bond, move on." He stopped. "I didn't think it would cost me everything." "Cost you?" Elara said. "My home, my work, my standing, my wolf. You didn't think publicly rejecting your mate in a gathering circle would cost her everything." He had the decency to look directly at what she was saying rather than away from it. "No. I didn't think it through. That doesn't fix it." "No, it doesn't." A silence. "Roderick is going to send people to this region within the day," Theron said. He suspected Blackthorn had made contact when she disappeared. "He's moving a party north to intercept." He paused. 8 wolves, shifted, with silver-laced weapons. Calum went very still. "How do you know this?" Elara asked. "Because he told me yesterday, when he summoned me to report your position. He was angry I hadn't located you faster. He gave me until midday today before he moves the party regardless." He looked at Elara steadily. "I came to warn you instead." The forest was quiet. "Why?" Calum asked. Theron looked at him. "Because what Roderick is doing is wrong. And I knew it when I agreed to it. And I agreed anyway." A pause. He stopped. Started again. "Because she doesn't deserve to die for my decisions." Elara looked at him for a long moment. "How far are Roderick's party from this position?" Calum asked. "Half a day south. If they move at pace. Less if they shift." And Theron frowned. Wulfric Reed, he's. Something changed in his expression, a rapid reassessment. "You're going to Reed." "How far?" Calum asked again. 2 days north of here," Theron said slowly. "But Roderick has people on the route." "We're not on the route," Elara said. "We've been cutting east." Theron looked at her and then at the terrain around them and worked something out. "There's a pass," he said, "through the Harrowstone Ridge. I know it. I hunted through there years ago. It cuts the 2 days to one. And it's not on any official map." He paused. "Roderick's people won't know it." Another silence. "You'd take us there," Calum said. "Not a question, yes. And we're meant to trust that?" Elara said. Theron looked at her. "No, you're not meant to trust it. You should verify everything I've told you and make your own decision." He stopped. "That's what you always did. I never trusted it when you did it. I should have." He met her eyes. "I know what I did to you was wrong, Elara. I'm not asking you to forgive it. I'm asking you to let me do one thing right." The wind moved through the trees above them. Elara looked at Calum. He was watching her. Not making the decision, not weighing in, giving her the call. She turned back to Theron. "You walk ahead of us," she said. "You don't shift. If at any point your route leads us toward Roderick's people rather than away from them, Calum will know before you do." She held his gaze. "Understood?" "Yes." "Then show us the pass." Theron walked ahead. The pass through the Harrowstone Ridge was real. A narrow cut between 2 rock faces that the official maps had apparently never recorded. Wide enough for single file. Navigable if you knew where to look for the footing. It saved them, by Elara's estimate, the better part of a day. They were through the pass and into the gentler terrain beyond by late afternoon. And Theron had not led them wrong. She was recalibrating, not forgiving, not trusting, recalibrating, because she was a healer. And healers dealt in what was actually true rather than what was convenient. When Calum went rigid, she stopped. "What, they're here, ahead of us, not behind Roderick's people." Yes, he was reading the air with focused intensity. They flanked. They didn't come south. They circled. Someone told them about the pass. She looked at Theron. Theron had gone pale. "I didn't." He stopped, turned, sniffed the air with the automatic instinct of a wolf, and his face changed. "That's Borix Lasher. He's Roderick's tracker. He's been in my pack for 2 years. I didn't know he was reporting to Roderick directly. Someone in your pack informed on the pass," Calum said. "Not me, I swear to you. Not me." Calum looked at him for a long moment. Elara watched him read Theron the way he read everything, methodically, without rushing to the conclusion he might prefer. And then something in his expression settled. "I believe you." Theron blinked. "It doesn't change the situation," Calum said. "They're ahead. Roderick's party will be coming up behind us. We're in the pass." He said it simply, without drama. The way he said all the true things. They were trapped. Elara looked up at the rock faces on either side, looked at the narrow track ahead, looked at Calum. His suppressor mark was gone. His strength was back. He had not shifted since she had bought him in the market. He had been in human form for nearly 4 weeks. First because he could not shift. Then because shifting would be visible and identifiable. She looked at him. He looked at her. "How many can you handle?" "Ahead, 2, maybe 3. He paused. "Behind will be 8. That's too many alone." "Not alone," Theron said. They both looked at him. He looked back steadily. I am a Duskmare Alpha. I can fight. A pause. I should fight for this. Elara looked at Calum looked at Theron with that careful measuring assessment. Take the rear with me, Calum said. Elara goes ahead, she said, because she had already worked this out. Clears through to the open ground on the other side. Finds high ground. Watches for Reed's scouts. She met Calum's eyes. Reed's people will be ranging this far south if he's been pulling forces north for days. If I can reach one of his scouts. It's exposed ground, Calum said. I know, Elara, the suppressor mark on my neck, she said. It's been burning for 3 days. Calum, differently than before. Something is happening under it. She held his gaze. If I need to. I think I can. I don't know what I can do, but I think I am not as exposed as I look. He looked at the brand on her neck. His expression moved through several things quickly. What do you feel? He asked carefully. Like something that has been locked in a very small space. For a very long time, is running out of patience. The sound of shifted wolves came from behind them. Filtering through the pass, Calum said. Fast. Don't stop. She went. The open ground beyond the pass was exactly what Theron had promised. A broad, sloping meadow, a valley falling away below it, the northern territories rising blue and indistinct in the distance. She ran across it without looking back, listening to the sounds beginning in the pass behind her. Snarls, impact. The specific violence of wolves in combat. She was 200 yards out when the suppressor brand on her neck cracked. Not metaphorically, she felt it. A physical fracture, like ice breaking. Running from the edge of the burn scar outward in both directions, heat flared through her from the neck down. Not painful, not yet, but enormous. Like a door opening onto a room that had always been there. She stumbled, caught herself. Kept running, the crack widened behind her. She heard a sound that was Calum. She knew his voice, knew it in its human register, and somehow knew this too. The deep resonant sound of a full alpha shift. The first one in nearly 4 weeks. And then the sounds of combat changed quality entirely. She was at the far edge of the meadow when she saw them. 3 wolves on the ridge above, grey and disciplined, moving in the tight formation of military scouts, not Roderick's wolves. The formation was wrong for Roderick's undisciplined hired fighters. This was trained movement, Reed's scouts. She stopped. Stood in the open meadow with the suppressor brand fracturing along her neck and her lungs burning, and her hands beginning to glow very faintly, gold-white. The way they had in the shed when she had healed Calum in the firelight and hadn't understood what she was looking at. One of the scouts shifted back to human form on the ridge above her. Hold. Identify yourself. She looked up at him. My name is Elara Thorne. Her voice came out larger than it should have, resonant with something she had never heard in it before. I am traveling with your king. He is in the pass behind me, and he needs your people right now. The scout stared at her hands. At the light, he went to one knee. Blood witch. The word arrived in her ears with the weight of something she had been waiting her whole life to hear without knowing it. Blood witch, the rarest gift in the pack world. Born once a generation, sometimes less. The reason Roderick had been so frantic to find her. The reason Theron had buried her under a ceiling brand on the first year of their bond. Not because she was an Omega, because she was the opposite. Because what was sleeping in her would have outshone him in any room they walked into together, and he had not been man enough to stand beside that. So he had spent 6 years quietly making sure no one, including her, ever saw it. Now, please. The scout turned and made a signal to the 2 shifted wolves behind him. A sharp double gesture, and they were gone. Over the ridge and south toward the pass at a speed that told her Reed had indeed been pulling forces south for days. She stood in the meadow and breathed. The brand cracked again, wider. This time it hurt. A deep wrenching ache that went from her neck through her spine and into her chest. She went to one knee on the grass and pressed her glowing hands flat against the earth and told herself, not yet, not yet. Wait, whatever was coming, whatever she was. Whatever had been locked inside the brand Theron had put on her neck. It was going to come when it was ready, and she was going to meet it on her terms. Not the meadows, she breathed. She waited, and in the pass behind her the sounds of battle began to change. She turned back toward the pass with her hands tingling and the gold-white light pulsing beneath her skin in time with the cracking brand. She did not run, she walked. The thing rising in her did not want speed, it wanted presence. By the time she reached the pass entrance, the fight was already turning. Reed's scouts had hit Roderick's wolves from above, and Calum shifted now, silver and gold and enormous in a way she had not let herself imagine. was driving the rear toward the choke point where the pass narrowed and numbers stopped mattering. She stepped into the choke point. She raised her hands. The light came out of them in a slow, steady wash, not aimed, just released. And every wolf in the pass stopped moving, not because she had hurt them, because what she was projecting was the biological opposite of a threat. A deep, ancient signal that said, here is where the wounded come. Here is shelter. Here is the place a body remembers from before it had words. Roderick's hired wolves shifted back to human form involuntarily, the signal too strong to fight in animal shape. They sank to their knees in the dust of the pass. Reed's scouts held their positions and watched her with the careful reverence of trained soldiers, receiving something they had only read about in old books. Theron was on the ground at the pass entrance. Silver-laced wound through his side. Conscious. Watching her with an expression she could not read and did not try to. She crossed to him, crouched, pressed her hand to the wound. The light went into him. She did not say anything. He did not either. She was not healing him because she had forgiven him. She was healing him because she was a healer. That was the difference between them, and that was the difference she intended to keep. He breathed out. Color came back into his face. She stood up, walked past him, did not look back. Calum had shifted back. He was waiting at the far end of the pass with the kind of stillness that came after great exertion, breathing carefully, blood at one shoulder and one thigh that the gold light had already begun to reach. She stopped in front of him, did not touch him yet. You held, he said. I held. He looked at her hands, at the light still moving under her skin. He looked at her new, she said, about what I suspected. From the second night, the way the harvest wounds responded to your hands. A pause. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure, and because telling you would have meant telling you the rest of it. And I wasn't ready to give you that choice. You're a stubborn man. He almost smiled. The full one this time. Held a beat longer than any she had seen before. I am told that often, Wulfric Reed arrived at the trees an hour later with 200 wolves at his back. The first column of a force that had been waiting for confirmation for 6 days, and had moved the moment his scout's signal reached him. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 60s with a weathered face, and the specific warmth of someone who had spent decades responsible for the lives of wolves younger than himself. He came down off his horse and looked at Calum for a long moment without speaking. Then his voice came out roughly. I told them you weren't dead. You were right. Reed gripped his forearm in the old pack greeting, firm and held, and when he released it, his eyes were bright in the way of older men who had stopped being ashamed of what moved them. Then he looked at Elara. She was aware of how she must look, forest-worn, boots tied with bark, hands still faintly luminous, the fractured suppressor brand on her neck visible in the late afternoon light. Reed's expression did something she had not expected. Not surprise, not calculation, something like recognition. Blood witch, he said, quietly, with exactly the same weight Calum's scout had given the word, apparently. He looked at Calum, he looked back at her. My grandmother carried a book for 30 years about the last one. She kept it on the highest shelf in her house. She made me promise to give it to the next one when she came. He paused. I have it in my saddlebag. I have carried it through 3 campaigns. I have never been able to decide if she was certain, or if she had just decided to be certain. He looked at Elara steadily. She was never wrong about anything, which I always found inconvenient. Elara almost smiled. I'll take the book, she said. I expected you would. They sat in Reed's campaign tent for an hour. Calum laid out the structure of the coup, the harvest operation, the forged seals, the timeline, the 14 packs Roderick had compromised. Reed listened without interrupting. When Calum finished, Reed was quiet for a moment. Roderick's timeline. 12 days before the succession crisis becomes untenable. 10 now. We've burned 2 in the rough terrain. 10, Reed said. I have 1,400 wolves pulled south. Solis at the coast garrison received Lyra Blackthorn's message 4 days ago. He'll be moving north and west. We can reach the capital in 8 days with combined forces. He looked at Calum. Roderick will know you're alive the moment we move. He'll accelerate. Let him, Calum said. He'll move against the outer packs who haven't committed. Pressure them to declare for him before you can reach them. Then we reach them first, Elara said. Both men looked at her. Roderick's leverage over the uncommitted packs is that they don't know if the king is alive. The moment they know, confirmed, not rumored, not reported through intermediary, that leverage disappears. If Calum sends direct word to each uncommitted council tonight, before Roderick knows he's at Reed's camp, messengers through the night. By morning, Roderick is dealing with a realignment he didn't anticipate on a timeline he can't control. Reed looked at Calum. She's right. I know she's right, Calum said. I'm looking at you looking at her. He stood up and picked up his campaign map. I'll have messengers ready within the hour. He moved to the tent entrance. The Blood Witch travels under my protection from this moment. My wolves know what she is. They'll respond accordingly. He paused at the opening, and someone find this woman proper boots before morning. He left. The 8 days to the capital were a different kind of journey than the 26 that had preceded them. There were roads, there was food, there were 1,400 wolves moving with the organized certainty of a force that knew its purpose. And at the center of that force, Calum moved like something restored to its correct context. Still quiet, still the man who had lined boots with bark in the dark without being asked, but fully himself in a way she had only seen in pieces before. Socius joined them with 400 wolves on day 4. Bertrand Allard came in from the west with 200 more on day 6. Lyra Blackthorn at his side, looking quietly satisfied with the way her information had moved across the country and pulled an army together. The capital was called Ironkeep. It rose on the horizon on the 8th morning like something that had been waiting. Elara rode beside Calum at the head of the column and looked at it and felt the suppressor brand on her neck pulse once deeply. The capital's old wards are sensing it, Calum said quietly. They were designed to recognize blood witches. The last one to pass through Ironkeep was my grandmother. She glanced at him. Is that a problem? It's the opposite of a problem. She turned back to face Ironkeep and told her pulse to settle. The half-mile mark took an hour of careful positioning. Reed's forces spreading across the 4 approach roads with the quiet efficiency of a force that had been preparing for this moment for 8 days. Roderick's wolves on the walls watched the deployment and did not sortie, which confirmed what she had suspected. He had not planned for this approach. He had fortified against a siege, not against a seal response. Calum rode forward alone from the column's head. Elara moved to follow. He stopped, looked back at her. I'm coming. I know. They rode together to the half-mile mark on the northern approach road. Ironkeep's main gate visible ahead, Roderick's wolves visible on the walls above it. Calum stopped his horse. He reached into his coat and withdrew something she had not seen before. A small flat disc of dark metal the size of her palm, bearing the crown mark in relief. He held it loosely. Then he pressed it once against the inside of his wrist, the wrist where the suppressor mark had been. She felt it before she heard it. A deep vibration, not audible, physical, moving through the ground and the air at the same time, like something enormous exhaling after a very long-held breath. It rolled outward from the center of Ironkeep in slow concentric waves. She could see it in the reactions of the wolves on the walls, each one touched by it in sequence, heads coming up, bodies stilling. The involuntary response of wolves receiving something old and irrefutable. And behind her Reed's 1,400 and Solus's 400 and Allard's 200, every one of them receiving the same wave, every one of them going to a knee in the same moment, the massive soft sound of it like a tide going out. The gates of Ironkeep opened. Not immediately. There was a long pause inside, long enough for something to be decided, long enough for Roderick's calculation to run its course and arrive at its conclusion. Then the iron gates swung outward slowly. The royal council emerged in formal procession. Not Roderick, not yet. The council members who had been his allies, who were now doing the first thing political animals always did when the weight shifted. They were coming to be on the right side of it. Roderick came last. He walked out of Ironkeep's gate on his own feet, which she respected, and stopped 50 yards from where Calum sat on his horse. He was a lean man of middle age with the kind of face that had learned to show precisely what it intended and nothing else. And he looked at Calum with an expression that had moved past calculation into something she read as a strange, grim relief. Like a man who had been holding something very heavy and had finally been allowed to put it down. "My king," he said. His voice carried Roderick a long silence. Roderick looked at Elara, at the fractured suppressor brand on her neck, at the faint luminosity she had stopped trying to suppress. His expression moved through recognition and then something she had not expected. Fear. Not of her. She understood, looking at him, that he had known. The harvest operation, the coup, the careful weeks of hunting. All of it had been about reaching her before she reached Calum, before the bond between a king and his blood witch completed. He had been too late by 3 coins. He took 1 step forward, just to her, and spoke low enough that only she could hear. 6 months ago, through a contact in Duskmere, I had a chance. A clean one. I didn't take it, because I trusted Theron Vance had buried you deep enough that nothing would wake you. That is the one mistake I will not be able to forgive myself for. Not the coup. The coup I understand. Letting you live, when I knew exactly what you were, when I knew exactly what your husband had done to keep it down. That was the failure. She did not answer him. She looked at him until he stepped back. He said nothing else. Reed's wolves came forward to take him into custody. He did not resist, and Elara watched and felt nothing she had expected to feel, and everything she should. The council chamber of Iron Keep was a room with stone floors and high rafters that she recognized from a dream she had had on the road weeks ago. She stopped in the doorway for a moment and breathed. Calum stopped beside her. The dream, he said. The same place, different perspective. She had thought about that sentence in the forest and on the road and in Reed's campaign tent. She thought about it again now. You dreamed you were on the throne, and I dreamed you were beside it. That was the difference. The formal reclamation took place the following morning. Reed had arranged it with characteristic efficiency, council members in their places, Solis and Allard flanking the chamber entrance. Lyra Blackthorne at the back with the satisfied expression of a woman whose network had delivered on every count. The formal documents, the seal acknowledgement, the Crown authority transfer, all correct, witnessed, recorded. When the formal proceedings completed and the chamber acknowledged Calum's reclaimed authority, he did the thing Elara had not expected. He turned to face her in front of the council. There is one more matter of formal record, he said. His voice carried in the stone acoustics. The chamber was still. Elara Thorne of the former Duskmere territory is a blood witch of the royal line's recognition. The suppressor mark placed on her by Theron Vance of Duskmere was an illegal sealing of a blood witch's gifts, which carries the penalty of full territorial forfeiture under Crown law. He paused. The mark is dissolved by Crown authority, recorded, and the record will stand in every Pack Council's archive in every territory under my rule. He looked at her. Come here, he said quietly, only for her. She crossed the chamber floor and stood in front of him. He reached up and pressed 2 fingers to the fracture lines of the suppressor brand on her neck, and spoke a word in the old formal language that she felt more than heard. The brand dissolved, not gradually. The burn scar lifted from her skin and was simply gone, leaving nothing behind, not even a tender spot. And her wolf rose, silver-white and enormous and fully, finally, completely herself. Not the terrifying, uncontrolled flood she had been afraid of. Something natural and inevitable. Like breathing out after holding her breath for 6 years, the blood witch light came with it, gold-white, warm, flowing outward from her hands and the space around her. Every wolf in the chamber received it. She heard Reed make a low, involuntary sound, the sound of a wolf receiving something it had not expected. She heard the murmur move through the chamber and out to the approach road where the waiting wolves received the edge of it. Then it settled, and she was simply herself, standing in the council chamber of Iron Keep, with the bond between herself and the king she had bought at auction with 3 coins completed and real and ancient, and the chamber was on its knees. Not at his command, not out of protocol, because what they were receiving was the rarest thing their world produced, and their bodies knew it. The oldest council member, a white-haired woman named Dorothea Wren, who had sat on the royal council for 30 years, looked at Elara from her kneeling position and said with the gravity of someone making a formal attestation, the old pairing, king and blood witch. We have not seen this in 3 generations, the old pairing. Reed echoed from the back of the chamber in a voice that was not entirely steady. Elara looked at all of it, the council chamber, the formal rows, the kneeling wolves, the open doors, the morning light coming through the high windows of Iron Keep. She looked at Calum beside her. He was looking at her with an expression she had no remaining category problems with. She knew it completely. She had been learning it across nearly 30 days of fires and forests and difficult country. Certain, accurate, without doubt. Now what? She asked, and Calum smiled fully, completely, the real one she had been seeing pieces of for weeks, and said, now everything she would learn, in the months that followed, that being a blood witch in residence at Iron Keep meant becoming the crown healer by old precedent. She would clear a backlog of healer commendation petitions Roderick had quietly buried for 2 years. She would approve apprenticeships. She would take Reed's grandmother's book down off her own high shelf and read it slowly, in the evenings, and discover that the woman who wrote it had also struggled with being feared by the man she had loved, and had written about that struggle plainly, and had not been bitter about it, only honest. Roderick was tried, convicted on every count, and sent into permanent exile in the northern border territories. When the sentence was read, he looked at Elara across the tribunal chamber. She held his gaze until he dropped it. That was the entire conversation. It was enough. Theron Vance was stripped of his alpha standing. The Duskmare Pack's political status was dissolved. He was given a middle-rank position in a small Eastern Territory pack under the supervision of a council-appointed overseer. He testified honestly during the proceedings and then implicated 12 additional pack leaders in Roderick's network. He did not contest the sentence. He never asked Elara for forgiveness. She thought about that sometimes, about how the not asking was the closest he had come, in 6 years, to understanding her. Meredith Fenn received a formal crown commendation and a grant of permanent market stall rights. She sent a letter back. The letter said, "I gave a key to a woman with nothing and 3 good reasons, and she spent it well. That's all the commending that needs doing." Elara kept the letter. And here is where the story leaves you, because every story like this is 2 stories braided together. There is the story of the woman who bought a king at auction, and there is the story of what made her capable of doing it. They are not the same story, and the second one is the one that matters. Elara Thorne spent her last 3 coins on a stranger because she had nothing left to lose. That is the easy answer, but the truer one is this. She spent them because the man who had spent 6 years teaching her she was small had not in the end succeeded. He had buried her. He had not erased her. And the part of her he had not been able to reach was the part that recognized, in a chained wolf with calculating eyes, another person being told he was less than he was. She did not save Calum because she was a blood witch. She did not even know yet. She saved him because she was the kind of woman who could still see, after everything, what dignity looked like under iron. That is the lesson worth carrying out of this story. The people who diminish you are almost never reacting to what you actually are. They are reacting to what they suspect you could be. The cruelest brands are the ones placed early by people who promised to love you, who were too small to stand beside you, and chose to make you smaller rather than grow themselves. If you are wearing one of those brands tonight, real or invisible, the work is the same. You do not have to wait for someone else to dissolve it. You have to refuse to let it decide what you spend your last 3 coins on. Elara walked into that market square with a brand on her neck and nothing in her pockets, and she still chose mercy over self-preservation. She still chose to see, when seeing was the most expensive thing she could possibly do. That is not weakness. That is the only kind of strength that survives being broken. And there is one more thing: the men in this story who turned out to matter were not the ones who commanded. They were the ones who knelt at the right moment. Cedric Vaughan, the enforcer who recognized a king and chose silence. Wulfric Reed, the general who carried his grandmother's book for 30 years because he had promised. Bertrand Allard, who sent a scout into the dark on a guess. Even Theron Vance, in the end, who walked through 2 days of rough terrain alone, knowing what it would cost him, to warn the woman he had publicly destroyed. Redemption does not erase what a man has done, but it is real. And the difference between a redeemed man and a cheap apology is that the redeemed man pays the bill afterward without expecting to be thanked. If you have spent your life next to someone extraordinary and never seen it because you were afraid of what seeing it would mean about you, this is your invitation. Look now. Look while there is still time. The cost of looking is always smaller than the cost of having spent a life refusing. If you have ever been the one with a brand on your neck, real or invisible, placed by someone who promised to love you, leave one word in the comments, just one. Say, standing, because someone else scrolling past tonight needs to know there is a stranger out there who has been where they are, and is still here and is still on their feet. That is how the chain works. That is how the brand loses its power, not in palaces, in comment sections, in the small public acts of one person telling another, I have been where you are, and I am still walking, and if this story moved you, even a little, The like button is exactly where you left it. It costs you nothing. It means more than you know to a small channel that pours its whole heart into every story. Until next time, stay standing.